Hey, welcome to the Art Condition Podcast, a weekly show that will discuss the business, community, and often undiscussed stress and mental health concerns of being a professional artist or even a serious hobbyist. I'm Joby. I've been in the tattoo and illustration professions for 25 years. My co-host is Moose, a data analyst, social media manager, and art agent. If you enjoy the content, please consider visiting the Patreon page in the show notes to help support the effort. Or if that's not an option, please like, subscribe, leave a good review, or just share with your friends. And definitely go visit the links of our guests on this episode. Thanks for listening, and have a great day. This week, we're talking to Rengin, an artist who does a lot of work in the publishing industry. She's going to have a lot of really interesting things to say about how to find and start talking to art directors, a lot of the professionalism that's involved in that world. We're also going to talk about balancing personal work with professional work, because Rengin has a pretty significant personal project going on with her Patreon called Netherrealms. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're also going to get into a little bit about time management, because when you're balancing a lot of things like this, that can be a real tricky thing. And it's a subject that we talk a lot about on this podcast. And honestly, probably can't talk enough about. We also take a small amount of time to discuss some of the mental health effects of social media, how its usefulness can quickly become a burden, and what we can do about that. We end on a high note. I hope that you enjoy. So without further ado, here's our interview. Rengin, how close did I get that time?
Super close.
Okay,
super duper close, like on point.
For my clumsy California-raised American tongue, I feel super proud of that. How are you? Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for taking some time.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about really cool stuff, but I, of course, want to start with you. And so if you could bring us up to speed a little bit, a brief cover of your personal history and how you got into art and where you're at today.
So I'm Rengin, and I'm a Dutch fantasy and YA illustrator. I currently do book covers and promotional art for games and publishing and anyone who might need my work. Clients so far have included Tor Books, Monte Games, and Schwab. How I got into art, it was basically always there. I'm one of those people, and I wasn't really ever discouraged from pursuing it as a job, I think. I had a point where I wanted to be like an architect or a veterinarian or whatever, but eventually I did decide to go for art.
There's no money in that shit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like here in Holland, we have three kinds of high school systems, where you kind of basically get split up. Like you're gonna do the really practical stuff, or a bit of a mix of practical and theory, like university, and you're gonna become like a doctor or an architect or a mathematician or whatever. And I got sent to the theoretical school, basically. But then, I ended up wanting to do art. So guess that happened.
Theoretical school?
I guess, yeah, but that's what I like to call it, because, they call it, it's like, they call it like for the smarter people, but, that's stupid. So it basically, like, if you do like the 4-year school, then you become like a builder, a hairdresser, or you work your way up into a manager or whatever. And then if you go to like the 6-year school, then you go to university, and then you become a mathematician, a business analyst, architect, medical school, that kind of stuff. So they split it up earlier here.
So is being in the art field looked down upon culturally?
Depends on who you are. I would say, so I think the art culture here in Holland is very, they expect you to be very diverse. So there are not a lot of specialist artists here. A lot of people are like, they do their thing, but then they have like we talk about a lot. They have a lot of loves. So they like to do graphic design, they like to do illustration, they like to do kids books or whatever, and they do it all. And that's kind of a cultural thing that I did struggle with, because a lot of the advice that I got until like a year and a half ago was become more diverse, have a very diverse portfolio so everybody can hire you. And for me, I guess it felt kind of like dishonest, and I think that that's what people picked up on in my portfolio. So once I started specializing, things actually picked up a lot more, and I'm doing a lot better. But yeah, that's the culture here, which is fine, but it doesn't work for me at all.
And so in your specialization, like what do you consider your fantasy, obviously, but do you consider that to be sort of like your specialty interest, or is it, fantasy art within the publishing industry, or like, how do you see that?
I would see it more as a genre. So for me, it would be, I call it urban fantasy. So like, kind of like realism mixed with a certain element of fantasy. So I always naturally gravitated towards like Harry Potter, Narnia, what else? The Golden Compass, all those kinds of books that have like a basis of reality, but they have a magical element added to it. And I always, I have drawn like the elves and the high fantasy Tolkien stuff, but I think I'll stick with urban fantasy. So I think that's my specialist thing. But if you ask someone else, they would probably say fantasy illustration is already a specialty. But I think the interesting thing is, the further you look into a genre, the more niches there are.
Right. Yes.
So within fantasy, there's going to be like urban fantasy, or like a romance fantasy, or epic fantasy, or all those kinds of things. And then within those things, there's going to be people who, within epic fantasy, there's going to be people who draw landscapes, but there's also going to be people who draw characters, and there's also going to be people who draw like elves and all the elegant, wistful stuff, and there's going to be people who love to draw the orcs and that kind of stuff. So it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it can get exhausting too, where you're like, well, what do I like to do? What do I want to do most? I want to do everything. I like that concept of urban fantasy. Is that your term, or is that a term that is like a more of an industry standard? Or I've never heard it before until you mentioned it.
Really? Well, it's a term I have been searching for. Let me put it like that, because when I started specializing like a year and a half ago, I needed something to describe myself with, so I was like, okay, I like these books. What is the thing? And on Wikipedia, urban fantasy is like Harry Potter, or like this one really famous Neil Gaiman book that I forget.
Sandman?
American Gods?
I think it was American Gods.
Oh.
And those are examples, and I was like, oh, okay, that's my genre. But then, so the interesting thing was I posted a poll because I talked to Lauren Panepinto, who's an art director, or a creative director, I think, even at Orbit Books. And she was like, in a blog post that she wrote, I need to say this right. In a blog post that she wrote, she said it's more like a romance category genre. And I got really confused, like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, because I
And so
immediately
did
started thinking about Fabio and like the big muscly
yeah,
hunky dudes, right?
exactly. But and so I did I mean, there's so one point is I wanted to make is I did a poll in like a Facebook group with all the authors, and like 100% went for like realism with fantasy elements and not romance. And I was like, okay, so there's apparently a different definition within self-publishing authors and publishing art directors, maybe. But then I talked to Lauren because I asked her, like, listen, I'm getting really confused. Can you explain to me, please, what do you mean with this? And she explained to me that actually the urban fantasy genre has a lot of crossover with the romance genre because it attracts a lot of female readers. So women who want to read fantasy, they don't usually read epic fantasy, but they read urban fantasy. And that means that you use a lot more romance genre checkpoints on your covers to attract those readers.
Interesting. We're gonna get into that idea of like checkpoints and stuff a little later on, I think. But let's dig into your history with the publishing industry, because this is fascinating. I think you're the only artist that I know really that like. I know that that's not just what you do, but you've done a fair amount of it, especially compared to like almost anybody else that I really know. In terms of like, you could say, well, I've done illustrations for Tor, and the like 12-year-old sci-fi fantasy nerd inside of me is just like, oh my god, tell me more. So how did you start looking into cracking that shell and finding your way into that?
That story starts kind of a year and a half ago. I was working for a creative marketing department in company, but then I decided, like, okay, I want to become a freelancer. The diverse thing is not happening, so I did a course at Oatley Academy. Do you guys know Chris Oatley?
Yeah.
Okay, well, he's like an art mentor person. And I did his course called Dream Machine, which is basically I would say branding for artists. And I did that course, and so I think he was the first person that said to me, you should specialize and like find your specialization. And it doesn't have to be your final decision. Like if you choose this, you do not have to be this forever. But choose it, focus on it now, and become successful in that. What is it going to be? And so I wanted to be an illustrator when I was 16, and then I let it go because I thought there was no money in it. Because I did think earning a living was very important. So I started studying game art. So that was the moment that I went back to it and thought, no, this is really like, I don't want to be a viz dev artist for movies. I really, really, really want to be an illustrator, especially for books, because I used to read so many books when I was a kid. Like I was a real bookworm. So during the course, I found that Lauren Panapinto was one of the guest lecturers, and that was like, that talk that she did was like a gold mine of information for me to start out looking. It was kind of like the basic information, I guess, but it was also like my starting point for developing all of this and like developing my new portfolio, throwing almost everything out and starting with all these new portfolio pieces. So if for other people, if they want to get into publishing, but they don't have the money to do like a whole course because it was expensive, at least for me, I would say read as much as you can of the Dear Art Director Tumblr. There's a Tumblr called dearad.tumblr.com, I think, off the top of my head. And there are anonymous art directors, and they give all kinds of insights to questions that people have. It's really candid because they're anonymous, and it gives a lot of insight into what makes them tick, what they like to see, what they don't like to see, at what point you're overthinking it, because that's what happens a lot as well. And there's just a lot of basic information in there that will set you up to ask the more insightful questions that will grab your art director's attention, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So forgive me a very basic question. This is for the sake of the just in case.
Yeah.
What is an art director, and why are they important? What role do they play in specifically the publishing industry, since that's sort of, what we're focusing on at the moment?
So, okay, I'll like narrow it down. So in general, art directors make sure that a brand stays cohesive. So for like it means different things for different industries. But for publishing, they make sure that you take your genre checkpoints, because every genre has different elements that they like to see on a cover, which draws the right readers in. They are your coach, basically, as well as your client, because they are the ones that pitch your work to the rest of the company, if it's a big enough company. Because if it's a smaller company, then you might be dealing only with them, and they're going to make the final call, and that makes things easier, I guess. But if it's a bigger company like Orbit or Tor, they're going to be in meetings with their editors, marketeers, whatever, and they're going to be showing your work to them, and they're going to be defending your work or gathering that feedback and giving it back to you. So be their friend. It makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, the last person that you want to be jerky or unprofessional with is an art director. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And for good reason. Art director emails are not easy to find. But can you talk a little bit about why, like explicitly why that is, and how you would appropriately go about trying to find their contact information?
So people tend to spam lists. A lot of art directors, not all of them, but a lot of them work in specialized areas. So for example, if you are emailing an art director at Tor, you don't want to send them kids books stuff because they're not interested. It's a whole different genre. And what happens when art directors let themselves be published in a list like that, they get spammed by everyone who just copies the whole list, puts it in a mass email, and then sends it out. And I think what people need to realize is that, especially at the bigger companies, they get like 100 emails from artists a day. So imagine, even if it's 30, imagine having to go through all of those every day. And then like 50% of those is not what you're looking for at all. Actually,
you said 50% or not?
Excuse me? No,
never mind. You continue. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, that's like 30 to 100 now. Imagine if their emails were public in a list.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then they would be getting even more of them, and a lot of them would be lower quality in terms of matchmaking. So yeah, it basically, it makes more sense for them to be harder to find, because then they know that the people that do find them really want it. As for finding them, there is one list that's kind of still floating around if you look really hard. That's how I started my list. But it's also a matter of swapping with friends. So I've had 2 people so far, and I gave them my list and they gave me theirs. So I could like kind of compare, and I still go through their list, like which client suits me and which one doesn't. And then I copy those over to my own ones. If you don't have friends in publishing yet.
Hey, what are you trying to say? I don't.
Nothing. if you don't have people that you can ask that yet, because if you go around asking everyone like, hey, can I have your list? Can I have your list? They're probably not going to give it to you, because that's the same as like putting a public list everywhere, and you don't know what's going to happen with that list. So you want to know what somebody's going to do with it, and that you can trust them with it. So you can go to bookstores. You can like look at the what's it called? Colofon. Like the credits.
Okay.
Like who's credited.
Mhm.
See, like go to the books if you really have to like start from like, I have no idea what publishers to go to or whatever. Go to a bookstore, pick up some books you like. Look who published it. Go to their website or go to Google, type in Tor.com art director. There are going to be some hits that come up. And then if you have one email, you can usually formula guess the rest. So, if you've worked in a company at some point, you probably know that it's always Rengin.Tumer at companyname.com,
Okay.
and it's going to be the same for every
Mhm.
colleague,
Okay.
usually. So once you have one, you can usually formula guess the rest. Yeah, I guess those are some ways that you can get some emails. What else? Yeah, company. Oh yeah, and I was gonna say, like, sometimes it's just a matter of like keeping your eyes open. Sometimes it just takes time, because we're in this day and age, we're kind of used to like typing in email art director, what publisher or whatever, and then getting those instant results. But sometimes it's just a matter of like seeing something come by and you're like, oh, I can use that. So an example is I've been following this the author Garth Nix for
Mhm.
years, because I'm a huge fan.
Mhm.
And I saw that his Abhorsen books were being republished by Hotkey Books, and I had no idea that this publisher existed. But because I saw it come by on Facebook, I was like, oh, that's another publisher that I would love to work with, because they publish Abhorsen, so they do the genre that I want to work with in. So I'm gonna, write those down in my write them down in my list, and then see if I can, formula guess an email or whatever, find an art director that works there, and then send them an email.
What would such an email look like? Just a cold call that you're sending out into the blue.
So when you're writing those emails, I think you want to keep in mind what you would want to read if you were the art director. So, you get up Monday morning, you've had your coffee, tea, whatever. You open your inbox and there's like 50 emails there. What do you want to see? It's not going to be an email that's this long, because you have 3,200 to go through. So I would say keep it short and sweet, keep it polite. I think it's better to be too polite, but be confident. I think I can say that to a lot of artists. So
Oh my God, I'm so sorry to bother you. If you can't read this, I totally understand. Please don't write back if you.
Nobody wants to.
Don't
read
do that.
Nuh-uh.
Oh.
Nuh-uh. Hold on. I have a draft. So.
Wait, is this an example of how not to do it? These are my favorite.
No, of course not, because this is my example. Because
okay.
So it is how, at least that's how I do it. So I basically say my name is Rengin and I'm a fantasy and YA illustrator from the Netherlands. My strengths are impactful storytelling with vibrant colors, clear communication, and hitting my deadlines. I've done projects for Tor Books, Monte Games, and Schwab, and I would love to work with you. Sometimes if I know the company, if I'm a fan of a particular project, I would make a remark about that project and how much I like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a fan of the work at whatever, and I wanted to email you my work for your consideration. I've attached a few JPEGs here that I think are most relevant to the work that you do. You can see more of my work at my website. Thank you so much for your time. If it's okay with you, I'd like to send you another update in a couple of months. Sincerely, me. So it's pretty short, it's like 5 sentences, 6. 6 sentences. But it just tells a bit about who I am, what they can expect of me. It shows them if I know their work or not. And it's just like a bit of respectful, like, please consider me for your work.
Right.
Please consider hiring me. And also read the guidelines on the website if they have guidelines. If they don't, it's probably okay to attach some files, but sometimes they have on their website like things like do not send samples more than once a year, or do not attach any JPEGs, or do not send any file attachments, or we want them in PDF, or send an update every half year, or never send an update. So go to our website, see if they have some guidelines. If they don't, then this is kind of like the standard format that I use. Most of the time, you will not get a reply because, as I said, they will have loads of emails to get through, and they won't have the time to reply to everybody. What else? Yeah, so that email, rinse and repeat every 3 months, basically. Because you want to stay like top of mind, If you send an email once a year, then they're going to be like, oh yeah, that person from a year ago.
Right.
So what I've noticed is a lot of people have a problem with even sending a first email. Like they'll say, after this next illustration, I'll send in my portfolio. Rather than doing it periodically. They'll wait until they think they have the best chance, and then they'll eventually send it. Then usually they never actually do send one.
Yeah.
So was there anything that you give advice to people like that have such a similar problem, or
just do it? And the the reason I'm saying that is also, I'll give you a reason to, is because art directors also like seeing your progress. Especially if they see you progress, they might send you some feedback, which means that you're, and if you get some feedback, that means that they see potential in you. And if you're making huge leaps, then that's also a signal to them, like, hey, we could maybe hire this person soon, plus it also builds rapport, because on average, somebody needs, like, I think 3 to 7 moments of contact before they convert into a client. That's like a consumer theory, but it also goes for art directors. Like, it goes for anyone. How often have you instantly spent money at something that was like the first time that you ever saw something? So if you just send that portfolio, even if you're not gonna get judged for sending your portfolio too early. If they are, they're dicks and you don't want to work with them anyway.
But we shouldn't, just to be clear, we shouldn't use additional points of contact as a reason to respond with follow-up questions like, why aren't you responding?
Oh my God,
that's not an appropriate point of contact.
It's, keep in mind that they're busy people, but they're also good people that love seeing artists thrive. So in that sense, it's the same with like us on social media. You kind of like lurk on social media, and then you don't always press like, and you don't always retweet, or you don't always whatever. But you still appreciate seeing those updates. And it's the same thing for art directors. Like, they appreciate seeing those updates, but they are too low on time to respond to it. But it does build rapport.
I want to ask let me ask one quick follow-up question before we get to Daria's question. Sorry, just while I'm thinking of it, because you mentioned something about follow-ups. Is there some content that you recommend for like what that follow-up looks like, so it doesn't feel like you're being pushy?
As in, well, I mean, I would just
go ahead.
So in terms of follow-up, I just like email new samples. I don't really like, unless they email me and ask me a question, I don't like follow up with the email. I just like send one in January, then I send another one in April, like, hi, I emailed you before, here are some new samples, this
I
is an
see.
update of my work,
I
I'm
see.
a student,
Okay.
I've been busy, whatever. And then 3 months later, you do it again.
I see. Okay. Yeah, right. So it's not like a specific like, hey, just checking in to see if you got my last email. It's almost like a new thing.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
I think if you're saying just checking in, it kind of signals that you're expecting a response, which you should probably know that they don't have time for unless you've already established a connection with them. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. Moose, were you going to read Daria's question?
You can do it. You have a better voice than I do.
So Daria Oxenova in the chat asked an interesting question. It's an anecdote kind of followed by a question. She says, I actually have a colleague, male. His art is below the quality that was requested by the companies. He just decided to find out the number and call them directly. Here's my surprise. He got the damn jobs. All of the ones he wanted. I'm still a bit shocked, especially seeing how it says no direct contact or we won't accept submissions on all three of those. I assume that means on all three of the contacts that he called. Maybe I'm just a bit jealous of the balls he had. He broke all the rules and got the jobs. So I wonder how often you should just break the damn rules and say, fuck it, push it till you get it.
That's a tough one. I think it depends on how big the publisher is. It depends on how charismatic you are. Because if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna be so flustered. It's gonna be totally awkward. I'm not gonna get that job. If he's like super charismatic and he can, talk his way, that that trope where you become friends with the receptionist.
Okay.
It really helps. Like it helps so much because they know where everything is and who the right people are. So if you can do that, sure.
She's saying he is
would
not charismatic.
Oh, and then I don't know how the hell he did it. Maybe you should ask him.
Yeah, this might be a magic anomaly. Let's have him on the podcast. I would really this could be really interesting. But that does connect me to one of the questions that we did have for you, where you had mentioned elsewhere some differences in how women approach this whole process compared to men.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a little bit? And do you have any specific advice to women in particular?
So the general thing, the general culture in the largest part of the world is that women should be more passive and men are praised when they are more active and assertive.
Right.
I mean, this is of course anecdotal, but I do feel when I get like really bold about things that I get called back quicker, like, oh my gosh, you're being really sassy right now, just cool it. And so I think it's really ingrained with women to be like really passive and not feel qualified to do things unless you're like a 300% sure, yourself. So how I did it myself, and I know that's hard, but it sounds really stupid, but I'm gonna say again, just do it. And I think what I try to do is really think about my sphere of influence. So if I worry about it, I tend to worry about a lot of things, and nowadays I try to think like, is this within my sphere of influence? So for example, I'm worrying about if I'll get more jobs. It's within my sphere of influence to talk to people if they have jobs, to post on social media, to email art directors, and ask like, hey, I have this art. Do you have any jobs that you'd like to give me? It's not within my sphere of influence to know if someone else is going to like me on the basis of their email address.
Mhm.
I can't know. So I'm just going to send the email. I'm not going to worry about something that I can't influence.
Okay.
And that's basically how I try to look at it. I do think, I just want to say to a lot of women, like, please be more confident. It is. I do think it's a societal thing, and I do think that a lot more women can be a lot more empowered about what they do. So you have my endorsement. Please do it.
Yeah. So not to turn this into life coaching for women, but I do think that this is an important topic. Do you think that there is something in your life that you can attribute to being able to find that confidence, or some things that you might
Yes.
suggest to other people that could help them do that?
So I was lucky. I had 4 parents that were incredibly supportive of me being confident and being the strong, independent woman that I am. So I was raised with a lot of allowance to be confident from the get-go. So I was lucky in that regard. I would say, in terms of, if you haven't had that, if you want to have that for yourself, surround yourself with people that will give you that. Be very aware of, and this is going to take, it's not going to be done in a day. Like, it's going to take
Mhm.
some courage and soul searching and being really honest with yourself. Who brings me down and who lifts me up? What kind of people am I surrounding myself with? And do I still want to surround myself with those people? Am I being honest with myself and my own skills? I've also been lucky enough to have parents that were always very open to, like, talking about, like, introspective things. So I do think that I have um, a better self-image than most, like a more accurate one. Like, I thought a lot about my faults, but also my stronger points. So I feel like I kind of know what they are. Yeah, it's scary, but it takes some introspective work. And I think that's not only women. I think a lot of men could benefit from that as well. Because what a lot of people say about, like, I don't know what I want to do most, or I want to do everything, or how do I find my target audience? I think a lot of it is being brave enough, courageous enough to sit down for a couple hours, a couple days, whatever, and actually thinking about what do I want and what people fit with that. So I think, both men and women can benefit from that.
I
Yeah.
think you can just straight up ask your friends who you trust, say, like, is there anything that I do that does not exude confidence? Like, is there anything that any habits I have that give off an air that I am not confident in what I'm doing? Because
Yeah.
a few years ago, I had a friend, a coworker. She smartest person in the room, and every time she made a suggestion, she would look around, duck her head down, and just kind of
Mm.
riff, and she'd like, and then she would, like, kind of crick her voice back and be like, "I think we can do this."
Yeah.
And I had to point it out to her, like, nobody has ever said what you've suggested is a bad idea. So it, just be more confident, be more assertive, because nobody is going to, uh, nobody higher up above you is going to think that there's anything wrong with you except for the way that you act when you're presenting your ideas. So if you just have the same confidence in you that your friends do, then you'll progress really quickly.
And trust them. Like I've had some talks with people where I go like, no, this is truly awesome. You should do this more or whatever. And they're like, no, it's shit. It's, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know what to do with that kind of conversation because, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to make people see, and that's why I'm talking about introspection, because you really need to be honest with yourself and like accept what other people are telling you, because I haven't like sat down at a desk and um, um, realized myself that I'm bad at whatever. I've I got that feedback from others like, hey, that was really shitty, or whoa, you were fumbling or whatever. And I got that feedback, I took it, and then I internalized it. Or whoa, you did that really well, and I sat there and went like, yeah, I did that pretty well.
Yeah, Spectrafe in the comments made a good point that there just isn't anything that you can do with that conversation. And I mean that can be okay too. On this idea of friends and finding a support group, it's something that we talk a lot about on this show, and it's worth noting that it may be the case that your friends, as good a friend as they may be, maybe they're not as great about giving you the advice or helping you with the confidence that you need, and you might have to look into other places. Don mentioned that Twitch art community is something that can be really good for that, and luckily enough, we have 3 very strong, confident women, since we were talking about women before, in the chat. And if it's all right with you, Rengin, maybe I'll link their information in the show notes for your show, just so like that can be a resource point
Absolutely.
that's relevant to our conversation here. Yeah, cool. So also related to this, one thing that you mentioned about 100 emails a day that they might get. How do you have any kind of tips or tricks for standing out in that, aside from what we've already talked about as far as like how to be concise and to the point and not have a super huge email? Like, is there anything else that can be done to sort of help stick your name out a little bit more?
So I think what they don't see enough of is actually portfolios that tick the genre boxes that they are working with. So for example, I don't know if I got these examples from like a blog post or a lecture, but for example, the genre checkpoints for epic fantasy are like, or like a fantasy trilogy are like, first part is sword, like a hand with a sword or whatever. Then the second is a hammer or an axe, and the third is whatever, And it's just like the item, and not per se like a person on the book or whatever. But then there's also the trope of the guy with the sword, that's going to be heroic fantasy or whatever. But then urban fantasy is a woman on the cover, realistic rendering, I think usually a city in the background, and some kind of like wisp of magic, and that's like urban fantasy. So
Okay.
Daniel Santos is like urban fantasy. So there are genre checkpoints that you can tick, and if you tick those, then I think you will stand out, because I don't think a lot of people, except for like experienced artists that like kind of like learned on the job or whatever, I don't think that a lot of people have those in their portfolio when they start out sending portfolios. And another thing that I would take into account is that book covers take kind of a different composition, in my opinion, compared to just like fantasy art that you want to hang on your wall, because they need room for like the title and stuff. So if you look at there was a Muddy Colors article by Laura Panapino. I talk about her a lot, but she's taught me a lot. And she talks a lot about like visual hierarchy and compositions that work really well for book covers. and you can always see like there's a little bit of space that leaves room for the title, but for a lot of people feels like the composition is too empty in that part. If you're used to like just making art for on the wall or whatever for use in a D&D campaign, that kind of stuff. So I think if you include those things in a portfolio, I think that's well, and of course, like mentioning something specific about the company. If you know a company really well, know their art director. Like if you say like, oh, I had an amazing talk with this and this art director, and they told me a lot about how this and this piece would fit really well with a project or whatever, you know, put that in the email because that's going to be your reference and that's going to be your endorsement. Yeah, I think those are things that I would think like would make you stand out.
Should we lie and say that Cynthia Shepard sent me to your email address?
And if not, why not?
So they're probably gonna find out because art directors do talk to each other. Like I hear Irene Gallo and Lauren Panepinto and Christine Fulzer like refer to each other all the time. And of course it depends on the niche. So I don't think games and publishing will talk that much with each other, or like French publishing and US publishing. Maybe more UK publishing and US publishing or something. But you know, there's going to be certain parts of overlap, and be on the safe side. Don't lie.
Do you know if art directors talk to each other across industries? Like obviously they talk within, you know, the publishing industry, but do, you know, publishing industry art directors ever talk to game development art directors?
I think it depends on the person. So for example, I'm not sure, has Cynthia Shepard done book covers? I'm not sure. If they might, like the point is like if they have a converging interest, then they might have met each other at like ElixCon or whatever, and they might talk to each other. They might have become friends. You don't know. I think Charlie Bowater is an art director at like Atom Hawk, off the top of my head. But I know she also does a lot of book covers, so she might be one of those crossover people, you know. But in general, I don't hear a lot of art directors from different industries talk about each other yet.
Right. I think you are correct about
it. Might be about.
I think you are correct about the Charlie Bowater, because I follow her and I remember her posting something about Atom Hawk recently. They were hiring. And
yeah, I know. Well, I know she works there. I'm just not sure in which capacity.
Oh, right. Okay.
So what about some outside the box ways of getting the art director's attention? Should you like mail them cookies or send them gift cards? Or
I'd be really scared if someone mailed me cookies. Like I would not eat those if I were an art director.
Rengin said email art directors with marijuana made with marijuana infused butter.
She's from Holland, so yeah, she uses drugs. Yeah, exactly.
That's how they do it over there. I don't know.
I think the best way to make a more personal connection would be, you know, outside of COVID times, it would be to like meet them at a convention. But the way I've done it in mostly COVID times, is asking the right questions, be involved in the community, like genuinely. So for example, I did, I bought this course by Lauren Panepinto and Mark Sheff, and it's called Make Your Artwork. That's another great resource. They have some free PDFs on like contracts and getting hired and getting found and that kind of stuff, but they also have like a whole course and then that gives access to their Slack community. And I was just active in that for a while, asking some questions, answering other people's questions, trying to be thoughtful about it. And so at one point, I asked about like the urban fantasy thing, and I said, like, Lauren, listen, I'm really sorry to bother you with this again, but I'm really confused, and I'd really like to know more about this because it's so important to me. And she emailed me like, listen, let's just set up a Skype meeting because it's easier to explain that way. So I got to like actually talk to her.
Wow.
That way. So I guess it's like you stand out by being a thoughtful, genuine person, which is really annoying to hear because I didn't really get it before I did it. But it really is it really is a matter of like being friendly, being genuine, and not generally not asking the questions like, what brushes do you use? but but more like the specific, like if you ask the really specific questions, they know you've done your research, and they know that if they're going to put time into you, then you're going to listen and try and put that to use, I think. So that would be my advice.
I heard once, it was in a relation to something else, getting articles published online, but they recommended finding the like Twitter accounts of editors for major publications as a way to, and not necessarily like, you know, hit them up with Twitter and, you know, blast their Twitter or whatever, but as a way to just like make a connection. You know, it's a way to kind of see like a slightly more in-depth peek into kind of what they're about, what they do when they're not doing their job, you know, those kinds of things. And it can be valuable information. It may lead to a more personalized connection, you know, like anything. Don't go into it with, you know, ulterior motives and, you know, being weird and creepy, but I hope I don't have to say that. But yeah, it's things like that. Or I was thinking, are there like, are you aware of like any like Facebook groups that are relevant to this kind of thing? Or
I know I'm a member of one Facebook group, but that's mostly self-publishing authors. It's not really art directors. Maybe I haven't checked like the membership, but it might. There's this group called, what is it called? The Mothership.
The Mothership,
thing?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
There might be some art directors active there, just because it's like the fine art ElixCon community fantasy art stuff, and that's where the art directors are generally active as well. But I personally, I haven't made any connections through that. I've mostly made connections through the Slack, you guys, like the Discord, the Fantasy Artists Discord, and email. Did I say that already? No, email.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, there's like loads of ways. I mean, that's always the thing about. It was 2 episodes ago who said that. Like the thing about advice is that the advice might not go for you. It might not work for you. It was Farley, but I think the person before that said it as well.
Sal, the Dark Cloak.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so you know, this is how I did it. This is what works for me. But the point is, this is also due to the mix of the person that I am. If you are an extroverted person, if you have the balls to phone up a company, then that might work as well, you know? So I do think that take all that advice, distill it, and then see what fits for you. I think that's the most important thing.
I have a slightly darker question before we sort of transition from the world of publishing, and I definitely want to take some time to talk about some of your personal work because it's really cool. But
Thanks.
to put a pin in it for the moment, do you have any sense of like what the future of book publishing is and the opportunities for people to be doing art for book covers? You know, as I hate the term the digital age, but it's having the effect that it is on everything. Do you have any sort of impression of what that means for book publishing, art for covers, and that sort of thing?
So I was reading this Reddit post yesterday, I think, about it was like an entrepreneur sub or whatever. I don't know how I got there, but somebody was saying, no, it wasn't author sub. Anyway, somebody was saying I had mostly ebooks, then I started doing paperbacks, and they sold like hotcakes compared to my ebooks. So people still love reading books. Despite what we think about like the digital age, I do think that books are pretty alive and kicking. But I do think that it is the nature of things to evolve. It would be pretty weird, I think, if publishing disappears before an alternative pops up. And if it doesn't disappear, then where's the problem? So in that sense, I'm a pretty optimistic person, in the sense that I can't be as nihilistic as thinking like everything will crumble, because I'm thinking because I think like we're too, as a human species, we have too much of a will to survive to actually let a system crumble, basically. So in that case, I think if publishing does disappear, something else will reappear, probably, that most people can work with.
I think there's always going to be a market, at least as long as our generation is alive, for people to buy hardcover books or even softcover. I don't know if you remember or ever saw this comic by Sarah Anderson, where she was it was like a 4-panel thing where she was budgeting buying food, budgeting schoolwork, budgeting, all this other stuff. And then when it came to buying books, she had this giant mink fur coat, and she was just throwing down money everywhere, making it rain.
Well, the key word there is, you said our generation. And I think like amongst the three of us and the demographics of, most of our audience, we could be the last generation of book buyers, because I feel like everybody coming after us could just be like, cool, where do I download this? This is not something that I legitimately believe, but I'm usually a pretty optimistic person, but the pessimist in me is just like, yeah, that's a dying art. People reading books like in 2060, maybe.
I don't know. I also see I can also see some kind of reactionary wave happen. Like in 20 years, everybody is so fed up with the internet that they massively go back to like libraries and books and whatever, because they're done with all the mental health damage that social media does to their minds or something. So
that is actually something that I am optimistic about, is that there is enough pushback happening against social media that the maladaptive attributes of it will become apparent enough that people will want to be like, okay, let's do something different. But we'll actually get to that, because you had an interesting experience with social media recently. But leading up to that, I want to shift over a little bit and have you talk about this pretty awesome personal project that you have going. Can you tell us about what that is and how that fits into your work?
Yeah. So my personal project is called Netherrealms. That it has to do with Netherlands is an accident, but it is what it is. And Netherrealms is a story that I wrote, and it revolves around a young woman called Nergui, who's really reliant on her father, but she gets forced to like learn to stand on her own 2 feet, because she gets thrown into the Netherrealms when a pandemic hits the world. I wrote this in 2016, not on purpose.
It's all your fault.
Yeah, exactly. I was writing it down the first time when COVID just hit, and I was like, oh, holy crap, man. Okay.
Too creepy.
And so, but Netherrealms, it's like a world stuck between life, death, dreams, and time. So it's basically a story about how Nergui needs to learn to cope without her dad, and naturally she wants to get back to Earth, to her own world. And so I took 2 months off of my day job to actually write a first draft for the whole thing. Did a couple drafts, said, okay, this is finished, not perfect. And I wanted to turn it into a graphic novel at first. I actually started like working 4.5 days to be able to do that, but I didn't have like enough time management skills to do that yet. So it got like pushed down a little bit. And then a couple months ago, I thought like, okay, so if I want to do more illustrations, because I'm always like making personal work to fill up my portfolio, I could use Netherrealms, make illustrations for that, develop be able to work on my own project, but at the same time also make portfolio pieces. So that's why I decided to actually start it up again, and I noticed that people were responding to it. So that's when I decided to like divert my Patreon from just personal work to actually being Netherrealms focused, because I noticed that people respond way more to stories, which I like rationally knew, but sometimes you have to experience it yourself to actually believe it or something.
How does that
yeah.
how does that look in terms of the stories versus the artwork? Is there the original idea was a writing project, like an idea for a book that you had, and then you started doing?
The original idea was a graphic novel.
Oh, okay.
Which I'd still like to do, but it's so different from like the work that I'm trying to do now, like the niche that I'm in now, that it would take, like, unless I get paid to do that full time, I would do it. But right now I need to combine my personal project with my professional work, and this is my way to do it. So I can like work on my personal project, but at the same time I can create a portfolio piece for my professional work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I'm able to justify working on my personal project, basically.
There's a lot of activity in the chat that is requesting that you please write the sequel or an immediate follow-up, where the pandemic is eradicated and everything goes back to normal.
Oh no, that's just the start of the story, guys.
Oh shit.
All
right, well, I guess
wait, are you saying it gets worse, or?
Yeah, no, I just said I'm a hopeful person. I do the hero's journey, not the, what's it called? I do oh man, what's it called? I don't do dramas.
Okay.
I do hopeful stuff.
Yeah, so like Game of Thrones everything starts to resolve and then it gets worse, and then everything starts to resolve and then it gets worse.
No, that's not my kind of. I mean, of course, it gets worse at one point, but then there's got to be like some. No, I don't do horrible endings. Come on, I'm a hopeful person.
Are you watching the show Yellowstone? This is
no.
Okay. If you can find it, I would recommend it for inspiration in how much worse things can get before they get better, and how great it feels when things get better. I
don't want to give things away, but things get pretty bad for her.
Okay.
So
yeah, I don't want you to give.
I think I do enough to my characters to justify these arcs. So don't worry, read the story, like follow me.
Yeah, so in lieu of the graphic novel, how do you present the story as it evolves in conjunction with the illustrations?
So right now I do bits of the story, and then I post it with a piece of text. Mm-hmm. So for example, I have like my mother timepiece, and it shows a bit about where Nergui and her mentor figure Zara, where they meet Mother Time, which is like a deity in the Netherrealms. And I just post a piece of text, like an excerpt of the story, and that's how I go through the illustrations. And actually, the project is letting me get more in depth about the characters, because I also, like, the Netherrealms are expansive enough. Hold on. What am I hearing? Oh, that's the rain. Sorry, I heard a rumble and I was like, what's happening?
Thank God it is just the rain.
Yeah. So the Netherrealms is expansive enough that I can like explore different parts without it having to be totally canon. But it's still like really interesting and it still explores more of the Netherrealms. So that's what I'm basically doing right now. Like I'm coming up with so many images. I just posted on Twitter like yesterday. Like I have a year's worth of content in thumbnails already for Netherrealms, just because I'm so inspired by all the pieces that I want to do, and all the dreamscapes that you can see. And it's also really interesting to because it's like the Earth is set mostly in the Netherlands, because right what you know. And so she would have dreams about the Netherlands and like elements from there. So I can make like really Dutch landscapes, but then in dreamscapes. And well, it's really interesting to me. There's a lot to explore, and I can't wait to do it. Basically.
Well, you had me at Dutch landscapes. I'm
right.
But I'm
very
so
flat.
Yeah, it's a windmill. It's a tiny little windmill.
Yeah.
So I'm so happy that you said that you have a year's worth of thumbnails ready to go. So I'm in the same boat. So I imagine you feel some of the same pain as far as like, how am I going to do all of these? Which one do I do first? Like how do you choose the next one that you want to work on? And navigate your way around this inclination to try and second guess your audience. Well, maybe they'd rather see this one, or maybe they'd rather see that one. And I really want to do this one, but should I make it cooler? All of those kinds of things. To sum up, like all of those neuroses that I'm projecting onto you and just assuming that you're just like me in this. How do you balance between the professional work and the personal work so that you feel like you're getting a decent amount of each done and you're getting the right type of personal work done?
Mm-hmm. So 2 years ago now, almost, I started using this work method called GRIP. I've been harping on and on about it for a year, but it's a Dutch book. It's almost out in English. almost. I keep saying this, but almost. And it's kind of like this work method. I think it's called Getting Things Done, but it's simpler and it's more customizable to how you work. So I basically try to get everything out of my head in terms of like scheduling to-dos and whatever, and onto paper or digital paper, whatever. So I have a to-do list, and I write everything on there, from buying presents for a birthday to I need to email this person back to I need to check my my audio setup before I have a podcast interview. And I time block my calendar. So every Friday, I sit down, I review the week. So this also comes down to introspection. How did the week go? What do I want to do better next week? And then I plan out the next week. I also have quarterly goals. So every quarter I sit down and I think like, okay, this quarter I want to get 3 illustrations done for Netherrealms. I want to have a certain revenue. I want to do 3 push-ups a day, whatever. And I want to email 50 people, for a job or whatever. And I try to make it really measurable, so it's really easy to see if I fulfilled my goal or not. And so it takes a lot of planning and also a lot of insight into your work. So I do time myself when I work, so I know what kind of illustration takes what amount of time, which amount of time. So I'm able to fairly accurately say a Netherrealms illustration takes me on average 20 hours. So I make sure to plan that into my calendar beforehand. So I block out that time so that when, a client comes, or like 3 clients come in at once, I can say like, okay, I can take this on and I can take that on, but I can't take that one on because then I'm going to run short on time. Something else that I try to do is like have a buffer for Netherrealms, for example. Like when I'm low on client work, I'll do 2 illustrations for Netherrealms, but I won't post the second one until the next month. Because I also, it serves 2 purposes. One, it's for my buffer. 2, it makes it really easy for people to know what to expect because I have a schedule. Like every Wednesday, I posted a Patreon. It's going to be 1 process piece. It's going to be the final piece. It's going to be a half-hour time lapse. And then something else. An insight into my work process. And that's going to be like, and then if there's like 5 weeks in a month, I post like a news thing, about like my client work or whatever. So every Wednesday there's going to be an update, and it's going to be really consistent, so people know exactly what to expect when. So all those things combined basically mean that I make sure that I don't overplan myself, basically, and I know how much time a task is going to take me. Generally, I plan generously, and I try to do it for as much as possible, especially sometimes even for home tasks or like private tasks, but especially for professional work. So, for example, my social media planning, I do that like once per 2 weeks, and I just block out an afternoon. So it's going to be like a block in my calendar every 2 weeks, social media planning. And I knew from experience that I went over all the time, so I started giving myself more time. I was like, okay, I need to take like this afternoon and give myself an extra hour, or else I'm not going to make it. So yeah, it's again, like I keep coming back to this, but I do think a lot of chaos in our lives comes from a lack of introspection. So if you're willing and able to analyze your own behavior, your own time needs, then I think you're able to take a lot of chaos out of your life, just because you're able to give yourself the space to do the thing instead of thinking like, because I used to get really discouraged when I would have like a to-do list, but I wouldn't time block anything. So I would say like, okay, today I'm going to work on 3 illustrations. I'm going to clean the house. I'm also going to email all these people, and I'm going to make time to watch a movie with my husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That does not get done.
Know that.
And then you get discouraged because you didn't get it done, and you're like, oh my God, I failed, I suck, and whatever. And now my days are like, oh, okay, I did this task. I did all my tasks for today. Oh, that was a pretty good day.
So there are people that we know or have met that they have a skill level that's appropriate for this kind of work, but they're not getting any jobs. They don't know where to look for these jobs. So how would you suggest that they block out a week, for example? Like how many art directors should they try to email? How many pieces should they work on to fill out their portfolio? That sort of thing. If they're starting at like just
They had a week?
one. Just saying the first week. Let's say the first week. How would they block it out?
I would say first just write it down on a list, and then block it out and see how much time you can fill. In terms of, I think it's really that's the thing. Like it really depends on your own schedule preferences. Like I know I always schedule my day. Like I do like an hour and a half of painting, then I have an hour and a half of tasks that I need to do. like things like email that person, post this, schedule this on social media, make sure the Twitter thread is retweeted or whatever. And then I have like an afternoon to either do business stuff. So for example, updating my spreadsheets or emailing all the art directors or whatever. And I know I work best that way, but I also know that a friend of mine, she likes to get all her to-dos out of the way first before she starts painting, and she saves the painting for the end of the day when she knows she has nothing more to do, and that's how she works best. So I find it kind of difficult to like give advice on that. I think you should give yourself the space to experiment with it for a couple months, and give yourself the space to readjust, because I know the schedule works for me now, but I had it different at first, because I did start out with my to-dos first, and then I noticed that if something didn't get done, or like I had an email, I saw an email come in that I had to like respond to, or that like gave me anxiety because I didn't know how to respond or something, that was in my head for the rest of the day, and I hated it. So I started out with painting first and then looking at my emails. So in terms of, I would say read the book when it's out. Yeah.
We've heard that advice before, of especially for checking email. Make that the very last thing that you do in your day. If it's one of the first things, you can sap a huge amount of mental energy from yourself dealing with that, or avoiding dealing with that, and that will just crush your creative capacity for the rest of the day.
I free you up. That's the point.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's like cut and clear advice to give on that. Honestly.
I wanted to get a little bit more granular on your system in terms of personal versus professional. And is it the way that you balance your week? Are you going to spend time on or in each area on any given week, or is it like this week is professional work, next week is personal work, and like you leapfrog, or
it depends on deadlines?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I have quarterly goals, but I plan weekly. This month I do have my whole month planned out already, because it was so much that I needed to know if I could do all the work that I needed to do within the month. So I already planned everything out, time blocked everything. But usually when it's like quieter, I plan week to week, because then I can anticipate on deadlines, but also things that I feel like doing or find important at that moment. So I've had weeks where I really focused on the Patreon, but I have also had weeks where all the client work came in, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm doing client work this week. So yeah, it kind of depends on the week, and I think it helps me a lot to be like a little bit flexible, but not more than a week, kind of, because then I know at the beginning of each day what I need to do, and I don't like sit at my desk in the morning and feel and sit thinking like, what was I going to do today, or what do I feel like doing today? So it's already scheduled, so I just do the thing.
So how do you punish yourself when you don't stick to the schedule?
I have this whip.
Flogging. Yeah.
Yeah. I schedule more time, basically. I think that's also the thing, like everything, if I don't make it in that time, either I go like another hour and finish the thing, or I'm like, well, that was a learning experience. Apparently I'm much slower at this than I thought, so I schedule more time, and I might get a bit cranky, like, let's be real. But yeah, I don't. It's one big learning experience.
Yeah, and there is some valuable psychology in that too. Especially speaking to the the concept of introspection, and being aware of your own sort of like internal monologues and motivations. And we love to punish ourselves. And I have recently sort of gotten really stuck on this idea of cultivating a relationship with the side of yourself that is friendly. Like every once in a while, there's the nice voice. Like usually it's all the mean voices, but sometimes there's the nice voice that's like, "You're doing all right," And I think that if we actually, like, it seems silly, but if we actually like kind of role play into that and pretend that we're talking to that person more often, then maybe they'll start showing up more often. And on top of that, when the mean voice kicks in, acknowledge it. You're like, "It's cool. I know why you're here. It's all right. It'll be cool." So then it's like, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid that self-punishment really, unless you're some kind of fucking Zen monk. And if that's your
you need
secret.
to be really comfortable with yourself if you're gonna, yeah, exactly.
Right. But anyway, you recently took a big chunk of time off from social media, right? You sort of like participated in your own like self-driven study. Correct me if I'm wrong, you watched that documentary, is it The Social Network? Is that what it's called?
The Social Dilemma.
The Social Dilemma. Yeah.
That's what kind of triggered it. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about that. And what the fuck did you do when you weren't on Instagram?
Well, actually, I kind of, what really connected with me was when Farley said, "I hate Instagram." Because I kind of feel the same way. So what I might do, what my plan was at first was to like do like a social media detox for a month. And I might do that from Christmas to like the end of January or something. So I think in that case, I would like plan all my posts to not like completely disappear off of social media, but then have like a disclaimer in my pinned tweet or something like, "I am off of social media. I am reachable by email, but here's my posts." What I have done in the meantime, because I did want to spend less time on social media, is I've tried to limit my social media use to 1 hour a day, like one specific hour. And I came up with that idea because when I was littler and we still had dial-up, I think, yeah, before we had DSL. When we still had dial-up, I got 1 hour a day on the internet from my mom, and I thought back to it and I was like, kind of like, well, that was kind of nice because I knew I could be excited about that hour in the day, but it wasn't an issue for the rest of the day because I knew it wasn't a thing that I was going to do, because it was a thing that I was going to do later in the day after dinner, usually. So I thought like, well, I could do the same with my social media. I'm just going to stay off of social media for most of the day. And after dinner, I can sit down for like an hour or half an hour or whatever and check all my social media and reply to some stuff and then be done with it again. And so at first, I'll admit it was hard because the first thing we do, or at least I do still, when I wake up is grab my phone.
Yeah.
Go to Twitter, whatever, Reddit. So that took some, like, I had myself, like, I took all of the apps off of my social media or off of my phone. I logged out of all the websites, and I still found myself picking up my phone, staring at it, going like, where are my apps?
Yeah. What do I do? What can I do?
So, it was, I think it took, I kept a kind of, little diary. Like I wrote a small bit about how it was going every day. I think it took like 3 days before I stopped doing that. And then after 2 weeks, I was really relaxed about it. And then I started slipping again. So I'll be super honest. I'm not adhering to the 1 hour thing anymore, but I want to restart it. It's just been really difficult because I've been preparing something that starts tomorrow, actually. So it's been really hard to stay off of social media.
What are you
because of that.
preparing?
I'll tell you later.
Okay. So,
Tomorrow,
but
in fact.
but
No,
it,
I can tell you like when we will like finish the talk or
Okay.
something.
okay. But so you did maintain that for some amount of time. How long would you say that you went before you started to slip and not keep up on it as well?
I would say a month.
Okay, so that's still a good amount of time. Like a month is
Yeah.
that's like a great amount of time. Like
Well,
actively be
Yeah.
controlling your own social media use. What are you gonna say?
Actually,
Miss?
something that happened now that let's go ahead. That I could look up my diary thing.
I was going to say, after watching The Social Dilemma, and a few weeks ago, Brian did say all of it is true, and that's true. Of course, it's true. But I see the evidence of it so often. Like I'll see an email from Instagram saying, "Hey, Mike, you haven't logged in for a while. Check out what your friends are up to," and it'll list the friends by name. And I'm like, "How do they know I'm talking to these people?" So yeah.
Wow.
That's brutal.
Yeah. So I started on the 19th of September, and my last entry is from October 8th, but I know that I went on for a little more. I just didn't write anymore because I didn't feel like it added to anything. So I would say a good month that I did that. And it was it was really valuable. And the way I gave myself like an out eventually was like having options, basically having hobbies. So I had like a book, that I was reading, and I had it like on my nightstand, so I wouldn't be tempted to grab my phone instead of the book.
Right.
I had time limits on my phone. I couldn't go on social media without getting a time limit notification, like, excuse me, you're not supposed to be here. And I actually like felt the urge to go draw again, like for myself, instead of seeing it as work. I just started picking up Procreate and just sketching again. What else? I watched TV without my phone in my hands. That was pretty nice. And that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, it's so weird, isn't it? That we ask ourselves the questions, what do we do without social media?
So weird. Yeah. It's especially because I'm old enough to remember a time before there was social media. And that makes it even more surreal. It's almost like having I don't know, maybe this isn't the greatest example, but it's almost like having amnesia after a night of hard drinking. You're like, well, that you were doing something, but what? But I would love to know if you have any noticeable impression of like improvements or changes to your mental state, your mental health.
I definitely felt like I had a lot more time in my day. And I felt a lot calmer. I do feel like, I'm not sure why, but I think like the thing that pulled me out of that social media thing was that I got a lot of notifications again. And like I really wanted to look at them. And a lot of times in the evening because something was going viral or whatever, and I wanted to like update stuff and respond to messages and whatever. But then afterwards, I really noticed like, whoa, that took a lot out of me. Like it takes a lot of your attention away. And I do feel like when you don't have to worry about social media or if you have any new notifications during the day, it just makes you a lot more focused. I mean, basically what other people probably have been reporting when they quit social media. Like you feel a lot more calm, you feel a lot more focused. You're less worried about drama that you don't really need to worry about. Basically, like a lot of drama passes by without you even noticing.
Luckily, you didn't have to worry about the U.S. election like we did.
Oh,
Yeah.
I dare you to care as much about our election in March as we did about your election. Like, it was
Oh, for
all
real.
over the news for weeks and weeks. It was, the media could talk about nothing else. It was a big thing. It was a
Interesting.
big
I didn't
thing.
know that.
Well, I mean,
All
thankfully,
eyes were on the US.
yeah, I mean, thankfully the election in the Netherlands isn't going to like ruin the world. But
Well,
Art
depending on who you ask, but
Art in the chat has had an interesting question. Do you feel like it affected your income in the time
Hmm.
that you took off, or as a result of the time that you were taking off? To paraphrase his question, did
that
you see
was
did you see a dip in contracts in new work?
so, I mean, to be super honest, I rely more on like the few bigger contracts than that I than like the small things that come in often. So no, but that's also because I was working on a really big commission at the time. So I was set for like 3 months.
Okay.
If but I'm not sure how my current commissioner found me. So I'll have to actually ask them, but it was like an email out of the blue. They were like, "Do you want to do a cover for us?" And I was like, "Yes, of course." But I have no idea where they came from.
So now that we're talking money, what kind of income do you said you get most of yours from big projects, but what are big projects? You don't have to be specific in terms of dollar amount, but you can be.
Well, honestly, right now, I'm below poverty level. But I also think that's because I just started. Like, I started my company like, oh, I started in 2018, but I started like illustrating for publishing a year and a half ago. So um, I do feel like I'm really still building up my reputation within the industry. And the last couple months have been a lot better. So I do feel like I'm actually getting my name out there. I'm getting a reputation out there that I'm, like nice to work with. I am on time. I deliver good work. So it's been getting better, and I'm actually pretty excited to see what next year amounts to. So right now, I don't make enough to make a living, but I prepared for that. Like, I worked in-house and saved a lot for like 6 years. I worked full time before I actually went out and started freelancing. So, um, you know, plus I already like had the house when I started freelancing and that kind of stuff. So I'd already built up a lot of stability before I actually did this, like jumped into the deep end.
Yeah,
So I
and
guess it's a matter of preparation.
that's a common thing that you'll hear people that are jumping into freelance say about it. Is that it's a tough transition, and you have to be prepared for some hard times. But that's one of the reasons that I was excited about talking to you, is because I feel like it's one of the interesting points to catch somebody, is you're like right in the middle of it, and
Yeah.
you're learning these lessons as we speak. Like 20 years down the road, when you're this seasoned veteran, that's interesting too. But maybe your recollection or the way that memory will color the experience, it could change the way that you would answer some of these questions. So it's interesting to catch it right now. But I wanted to ask too, like if you. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna expand on that in the sense that I think that One Fantastic Week, when they did their mentorships, that was more valuable to me than when they just did their interviews. And also when I like talked to like really experienced friends, I noticed that they say like, oh yeah, you just need to make a post about it on social media or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but I get crickets. What am I supposed to do with that? And they don't experience that anymore because they're so experienced and they have the reputation and whatever. So it's agree that it's really interesting to see what advice people give as they're experiencing it, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so we'll have you on again in 5 years, and
well, sooner, please.
no. But
No.
in seriousness, though, just spending a quick little bit more time on this break from social media. You know, you've sort of experimented with it a little bit. You have the plan to take off a full month. Do you have ideas for? You've talked a little bit about, you know, how you fill your time otherwise. But do you have specific ideas for, in terms of like productivity of either like working on projects, professional or personal, that you will make a point of plugging into the time space that you would have otherwise been on social media?
Productivity wise, I wouldn't, because I do feel like social media impacts more of my downtime than my productive time.
Okay.
That's me personally. So I'm already pretty good about turning off all my, like, I don't have any notifications on my phone except for like from my husband or from things that I need to remember, you know. But
so you're already
everything on
ahead of
that
the
is
game in this sense.
apparently.
Yeah.
So all of that is turned off. So I make a point of it to have like a lot of distraction free time during work hours. So I work, I don't work long hours. I work from 10 in the morning to 1. Then I have like an hour lunch break, and then I work from 2 to 5. And then I'm done, basically. But then I'm like also like spent, you know, because there are 6 high focus hours where I do like all my tasks for all the, you know, all the scheduling, all the discourse with clients or whatever. I do all my pinning in that time. But then, you know, while I'm sitting on the couch, because most of my audience is in the US, I need to post on social media on like 6 p.m. for me, because that's when the US starts to wake up, and that's when the responses come in. So it impacts my downtime more because I'm on the couch watching a movie, checking my Twitter because the notifications are coming in, and I'm curious if I have notifications yet.
Okay.
So in terms of if it does impact your productivity, I would say there's going to be enough that you want to do, because there's already a lot of cases where people are like, I want more than 24 hours in my day. So I do think that either it's going to free up more free time because you're going to be done with your work quicker, or it's going to give you space to tackle more of what you want to do.
You're like this unicorn. Like you're the first person I think I've met that has like alleviated themselves of the curse of feeling unproductive. Like you're not concerned with like ways that you need to be more productive or more efficient with your productivity. Is that true?
I think you're making yourself conscious.
No, I'm impressed. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it's interesting.
I do kind of agree. I just, you know, I've done the all-nighters. I've done the 12-hour work days. Like I studied game design, and the course, the university that I went to was kind of known as this really like work yourself to the bone kind of thing, where as soon as you got through the first year, you basically dropped one subject every term, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get through all the classes that you needed to. And like people had burnouts and whatever. So I did the whole thing, and I'm really aware, again with the introspection, I'm just really aware of what my limits are and when I am at my most productive. Because I used to be a night owl, but I noticed that I feel a lot better if I go to bed at 10 and like, or you know, prepare for bed at 10 and then wake up at 8. And I feel energized and I feel productive, and I I fill my calendar in a way that I know I'm going to be the most efficient. However, I do love setting up systems to try and be more efficient.
Okay.
So an example of that would be I used to plan my social media and I didn't really have a set plan. So I did know that I wanted to post like 3 times a week, but I didn't know what I was going to post. So part of the social media scheduling that I had to do was thinking up content, which takes a lot of time. But now that I have the Patreon scheduled, I take that and I translate it to a social media schedule. And I know exactly what I'm going to post when, or like I have like 50% filled in. And that saves me so much time because I just need to like copy paste something or like fill in a template and then I'm done. And I just need to focus on actually making the creative work instead of being worried about what I need to post on social media now, because that takes a lot of energy. And I think that's what a lot of people worry about.
Yeah.
With the added advantage that people know what they're going to get when.
Yeah. That's really cool. I like that idea a lot of like that compartmentalization. That I think that is for my own productivity. I think that's the thing that's missing. Of like, I talked about it on the last podcast. That's like what I try and think about in terms of like, this is my business time and this is like my creative time and all of that. But I'm still trying to like keep like the regularity of it is the thing that I feel like. You say you plan, your week out. Maybe that would be the thing to do, because that's still a struggle. Even though I know
One thing
I
also do is I bike around for 15 minutes before and after work. So especially because my desk is like in the living room, dining room, kitchen area.
Open concept.
Super open concept. I need to take myself out of that mental space or into that mental space, if I'm going to work, basically. And this really helped. One, it helps with my health, because I wanted to like lose some weight, so I started biking. But I noticed it's also really good for my mental health, because I kind of like I can get a little anxious if I have to do something like I know I need to send an email that I've been stuck on, or I'm anxious to know if somebody has emailed me back or whatever. And I can wake up feeling anxious, but then I go for a bike ride and I feel a lot better just because I've like cleared my head. Usually I listen to the podcast while I work or while I bike around or whatever, and it just takes me into a different headspace. And the same goes for when the day's ended. All right, I put on my shoes and I go for a bike ride, and then I come home and then either I start making dinner or my husband does. So it's I guess people say they don't like schedules because it feels too rigid. And in that sense, I agree, because I don't always start at like 10 exactly. Sometimes I start 10 to 10. Sometimes I start at 10:30 or whatever. But there is a rhythm to it that gets me into different mental headspaces.
Yeah, and I've also heard something about like scheduling time to be spontaneous. So, you've got like Friday afternoons where you don't have anything planned, and then that's where you can surprise yourself, and that this mental trick. But yeah, I don't know. Moose, did you have anything else to follow all of this up with?
Actually, I think I do that sometimes too.
Nice. No, Moose is quiet for once. God, it's such a blabbermouth and so shocking.
No, I'm good. I was going to ask a question about Oreos, but I don't think that's
Oreos.
Well, no, you've got my curiosity. What about Oreos?
No, I have a friend that was in the same region as you, and they collect Oreos because they don't have as wide of a variety over there as we do over here.
I didn't even know they have a variety of Oreos.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation itself. Well, before we fully wrap up, there's one more question that I have for you. Aside from personal work or client work, what's something that's happening in the world right now that you're really excited about?
I'm really excited that renewable energy is now cheaper than fossil fuel.
What? Where?
Everywhere.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. Hold on. There's this podcast, and it's from Gimlet, and it's called How to Save a Planet. And I think I heard it on there where they talk about it that like fossil fuels, and I think I've been reading about it for a while. It's become cheaper, and it's so cool because we've been our energy supplier has been some form of green energy for years, and it's really nice to see it actually confirmed that it does work because there are so many naysayers.
Everybody in the chat too is like, yeah, it's true. It's like, come on, dummy, where have you been?
Yeah, it was a
Thank
big thing
you.
on Reddit.
I'm not lying.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm just like out of the loop, I guess. Because it's my intuition based on, I don't know, like whatever talking head garbage that I probably shouldn't be paying attention to is like, well, how does America, relieve itself from fossil fuels? And the thing that everybody's always talking about is like, well, it's the gasoline or fossil fuels are so fucking cheap. Like it's hard to wean yourself off of something that's so readily available and, subsidized by the government and war, so this is,
it's also a jobs thing. So there's a lot of people out there would be out of work if they did switch off that money pipeline to them. But there are other jobs.
It also creates a lot of new jobs again, to work in green energy.
They're not
different union, but yeah.
They're not doing anything weird like including natural gas in green energy, are they? Like, is that?
I'm an expert. Like,
okay.
Don't ask me those questions.
Suddenly, this is a totally different podcast, but that was you blew my mind, which is why I asked that question.
Great.
This is now the air conditioned podcast.
Yeah.
In terms of that, having a more negative outlook on the world than necessary. There's this book I'm reading right now, which is called Factfulness, and it's by a Swedish scientist, medical professional. He's passed away now, but Hans Rosling, and he talks about like how to be more factual, but at the same time more positive because of those facts. And he shows like a lot of things about like how much of the world is vaccinated, how much of the world has access to electricity or vaccine. I already said vaccine, education, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. The answers might surprise you.
I can recommend that. I'm writing these things down: How to Save the Planet and Factfulness. They are notes for me, and they will be in the show notes for you as well. And
I do want to point out that we didn't unpin the tease from earlier, where she was going to talk about what was coming tomorrow.
So
she said, "Oh, you do want to talk about it in the recording?" I thought you were saying after it. Oh, okay. I thought you were saying after the recording is stopped. Okay, okay. No, yes, tell us.
Talk about it now. So one of the reasons I've been so busy this month, or I'm going to be so busy this month, is because I've been preparing a Patreon special offer. And so I've been posting like mad on social media, explaining people about Netherrealms and the Patreon that actually exists, because a lot of people didn't actually know it existed. And so starting, I think in 8 minutes, every patron that joins for the rest of the month for $5+ is going to get like a special holiday postcard from me in December, and it's going to be Netherrealms themed, of course, and it's not going to be in print anywhere else. It's just going to be for patrons, And it's launching very soon, and I hope to send it to a lot of people because I'm really excited about, sharing some holiday cheer with everybody in this hell year.
What I'm going to do is make sure that we post in the chat right now a link to your Patreon. So just in case that tickled anyone's fancy, there's a link to Rengin's Patreon in the chat now. So go check it out.
We got a countdown timer for 8 minutes. Set that in the VOD too.
Hypothetically,
I said
yes,
it right.
that would take me much longer though.
You know how confusing it is when they say like 12 a.m. on the 16th. Is that like in 8 minutes, or is that in 24 hours and 8 minutes?
Yeah. When are we going to figure this thing out?
I hope I said it right.
If not, you're canceled.
Exactly.
Well, I was definitely joking about having you on in 5 years. It'll probably be more like 10.
Oh, all right.
No. 10 months. 10 months. I meant 10 months.
Yeah, I'm going to be really proud of you guys if the podcast still exists in 10 years.
Wait, I thought you said you were an optimist. That's so harsh.
No, but that was the optimistic take because I'm going to be proud.
Right. Fair enough. We will definitely have you on sooner than that because this has been a lot of fun, a lot of great information. And I look forward to chatting with you again. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, you guys.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, I'm going to hit the end.